What's going on, gamers? It's your boy Richibon, and today I'm going to bring you the reveal of the Colorado Cramorant in the Calyrex Game Corners Pokemon Draft League for the second season. We're coming back, baby, and I'm so excited to get this done in Scarlet and Violet. Let me talk to you a little bit about the draft first, and then we can go into breaking down how I picked my team and what my picks are. We have a lot of awesome talent joining us this time around, and there's some familiar faces from BDSP, and there's plenty of new ones as well, and there's been some team rebranding also. For example, you might remember Kamihata, the coach of the Chicago Chanseys. Well, they have returned, and they're now the coach of the PT Pikachu. There's also myself returning with the Colorado Cramorant, and some new faces like the Treasure Town Togepi's, coached by Kira, the New Jersey Jirachis, coached by Blue, Unclaimed Room, aka the Keenan, coaching the Sudbury Snom. We also have the New England Nidokings, the Milk Biting Mousehold, Sherwood Berry Bandits. Last time Galactic Squids was coaching a team of a different name. This time it's the Sherwood Berry Bandits. We have the Wind and Dragapult making a comeback, and we have the Portland Timbers coming in for the first time. Windy City Whimsies are also returning. The Sydney Sylveons are returning from their partial season in BDSP, and then our new coaches, we have the Toronto Tinkaton, coached by Juggernaut HQ, and Lady Delmora is coaching the Glimwood Glimmets. That's all 14 of our teams. If you want to talk about the rules real quick, they're pretty similar to what we did in Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl. We're doing rosters of 10 Pokemon. The rules are all VGC best of 3, so that will be familiar if you were following last year. We're doing only one formed Pokemon per team, so that means you can have multiple Rotom forms, multiple Oricorio forms. There's an exception with Squawkabilly because 2 of its forms are the same, and then the other 2 of the forms are the same, and Toxtricity is an exception as well. The only new rules really is that terrestrialization is fully permitted, and we're doing kind of an offshoot of Series 2. So we're only allowing one Paradox Pokemon per team, and in DD, female cannot use Trick Room, and I believe that's all of the major rules that we have. I forgot to go to this slide, but this slide is basically the same information that I was just describing. One more thing is that we are allowing Pokemon that are not in the Paldea Dex, but are obtainable in-game, up to right before Greninja. So as I'm recording this, Greninja is the current raid event. We decided not to put it in the draft, but we do have Cinderace, we have Quagsire, we have Charizard, and we have Berserker, all Pokemon that aren't technically available in the Dex, but we are going to be using them for the draft league. So this was the randomized snake draft order. I ended up at 10th, which is a pretty cozy spot. It's kind of towards the middle, but also kind of towards one end. I'm fine with it. I would have been fine with anything. Obviously, like, you want to be on the end a lot of the time, but like being 14th means you have to wait a lot to get your next pick, and being first means you get first pick, but you're gonna have to wait a whole bunch of rounds until you get your next 2 picks. So overall, I think the snake draft is pretty balanced, and the 10th slot turned out absolutely fine. So unlike BDSP, where we did a round robin with limited weeks, this time we are doing divisions. Because we have 14 coaches, 13 weeks of play is a really long time, so we divided everyone up into 2 groups randomly. I landed in the Naranja division with a lot of really strong coaches, and in the Uva division, there's equally as great talent. So I'm really excited to see how these pan out. The top 4 of each division are going to be who moves on into the top 8 playoffs, or top cut. My very first pick of the draft was Dragapult. I will be totally honest and say that this wasn't my original plan at all. I had an idea to get a core of like Roaring Moon, Magnezone, Florges, and Volcarona. I thought those 4 pieces would be really, really strong. And as it turned out, Peachy Pikachu, coached by Kamihata, ended up doing exactly that. And I couldn't get Roaring Moon first because they drafted Roaring Moon first, so here I am with Dragapult. Why did I pick Dragapult? I don't know. I think it's a really good mon. I think it's really versatile. You can run it physically offensive, specially offensive, or support. All of them are totally valid. And I was saying this in the live draft analysis, which, by the way, if you missed the stream of the live draft, you can also find that link in the description of this video. Anyways, I was saying in that analysis that part of the reason why I wanted Dragapult so quickly is its speed. So speed obviously is a really important stat in Pokemon, but I think it's extra important in Draft League because if you have a high speed and you know exactly the Pokemon you're going up against each week, it's not like a diverse meta like regular VGC, you can adjust your speed to exactly where you need it. If you're scared of, if you want to outpace something specific in Tailwind, or there's like an opponent choice scarfer you're worried about, you can get exactly to that threshold and then not invest any more speed, and then you can get more bulk and more offense. I think Dragapult's a really perfect candidate for that. As I was describing earlier as well, you can run it physical or special or support, so my opponents, while they're team building, are going to have to prepare for all of those situations. Dragapult works really well in a whole bunch of situations, and it's just a strong, hard-hitting dragon type. Ghost type is fantastic. It's a good user of terrestrialization, has good abilities. Overall, I'm really pleased with this as my first pick. My second pick is my Paradox Pokemon, Iron Valiant. Again, the coaches only get access to one Paradox Pokemon at most. Some teams didn't draft any. I thought Iron Valiant was really solid. I think in a lot of ways, I felt a little not great going into this pick because it's kind of similar to Dragapult. It can be physical, it can be special, it has a lot of utility moves, so it's a good support, it's fast, and it's hard to predict. But I think while overall those are really good qualities, getting 2 in a row made me feel kind of not great about it. That being said, I had to pick this up before it got picked up by someone else. So right now with these 2 pieces, it's a lot of damage, it's a lot of speed, not a whole lot else. And I knew that at this point, after getting these 2 really powerful pieces, I had to round out my draft a little bit more. There's also something to note that I think type-wise, even though neither of these Pokemon are particularly bulky, they do complement each other pretty well. Having a Dragon type and a Fairy type together, always great. So with that being said, I'd like to move on to the next picks. Our very next pick was Bronzong, kind of the opposite of the first 2. As I was saying, it was on my mind that I had to diversify my team at least a little bit. Also, I wanted to fulfill this type core, this, as they call it, the fantasy core, which is a dragon type, a fairy type, and a steel type. All those things combined, they have really excellent resistances. I think, speaking of defensive typing, there's actually additional synergies here, considering that both Bronzong and Dragapult are weak to dark, and Iron Valiant is one of the few Pokemon in the game that actually double resists dark. Both fairy and fighting resist dark, so I felt like there was some good synergy there. Bronzong is mad slow, which is actually a really good thing. You want diverse speed tiers. It's a great support mon. Unlike the other 2, you could run it offensively. Heavy Metal Heavy Slam does do like a pretty good amount of damage. Its attacking stats aren't the worst, but really it's a tank. That's really what it wants to do. So I felt like having this as my third pick finally like it put some glue on my draft, and it's something else that my opponents have to prepare for, right? And it also suggests that after you see these 2 speedsters followed by a Bronzong, there's going to be some slower Pokemon showing up, which I think is a really good thing. I don't have to stick to one super fast hyper offensive mode. Bronzong just is really useful overall. Both of its abilities are great, and I personally think it's a good user of terrestrialization. So let's move on to the next pick. Braviary. I'm a big fan of Braviary, one of my favorite Unova Pokemon, and I just thought it would really fit well here. I think the Defiant ability is something that's really important to have, just in general. Personally, I'm a big fan of it. Sheer Force is also usable. Probably won't be using Keen Eye, but we'll have to wait and see. Maybe there's some accuracy strats that are going to be happening. I thought this was a really strong C tier, and I wanted to make sure to pick it up early. This is also another excellent user of terrestrialization. It has some really powerful attacks that if it could just get a stat bonus on, it would really push it over the edge with that base 123 attack stat. Overall, I'm really pleased with it, and I think it's going to round up my team a lot and offer a Tailwind mode. My 2 picks right after my most offensive early round 1 and round 2 picks both offer elements of speed control, which I think is huge. Iron Valiant does get Icy Wind, but I wanted like more hard determined speed control, so Trick Room on Bronzong and Tailwind on Braviary just really adds a lot more threat and complexity to my draft. My next pick was Pachirisu. This was one of the first D tiers picked up in the draft. I saw the pieces that were going, you know, Mousehold was gone, Indeedee was gone, or it was about to be gone, but I didn't want to get another A tier. I wanted to have more tier diversity, so there just wasn't many Follow Me mons left, and I felt like for this team with these speed options, these setup options, I really wanted redirection. And Follow Me is just better than Rage Powder because grass types and safety goggles don't ignore it. Pachirisu is also just a really solid support mon, and if I really needed to, I can have it do damage, I guess. It's 45 base, so I'm not expecting much. But Nuzzle's an incredible move. It gets Helping Hand, it gets Follow Me. It's just super useful. Volt Absorb is really neat, and Pickup actually has a good amount of utility in this format, so it's a D tier. It's not the greatest Pokemon of all time, but it is a world champion, so I felt like I had to get the Sage and Park special, pick up Pachirisu, and I think it's really going to help me add more support to my first 2 picks, which were super offensive. Bronzong's not particularly offensive. Braviary is, so I think right now I have kind of 2 supports and 3 offensive pieces, and that feels pretty good so far. I have 5 pieces left to go. Let's see what I end up picking up. I picked up Crocodile. I'm really pleased with this. I really wanted a strong Earthquaker. If you remember from the BDSP format, I had my eyes on Rhyperior before Gentleman Garby picked it up. I picked up Rhydon, and Rhydon did a lot of work for me. Just having access to Earthquake just forces your opponents to be prepared for it. They gotta get air balloons, they gotta get Shuka berries, they have to get Terra Flying going. There's always the threat that I can just do a hyper offensive Earthquake mode, and that's great. Not to mention Crocodile has some great abilities, all of them. Intimidate, Moxie, and Anchor Point are all very useful. I see myself using Intimidate and Moxie the most, but I'm not going to count out a critical hit strategy if I can find access to that on my draft at all. It has good overall stats, another one of my favorite Pokemon that's in Unova, and I think it's going to do a lot of good work for me. And again, the defensive typing as well, considering that Dragapult and Bronzong are weak to Dark and Ghost, Crocodile resists both, and I think that's a really great tool to have. Up next is Rotom Mo. So I really wanted a grass type, and I loved having Meganium in BDSP. It was such a high value D tier for me. This is a B tier, of course, but it does a lot more than Meganium. It's really offensively threatening. It's immune to Spore and Sleep Powder and Rage Powder, which I think is really huge for something that can be so threatening. You can put a choice item on it and trick that around, or you can just do a bunch of damage. I'm really happy with it, and if you can't tell already, I picked up Crocodile, and now I have 3 options that are natively immune to Earthquake. So Bronzong with Levitate if I'm running Levitate, Braviary's a flying type, and Rotom levitates. So I think this is a really, really good tool for me, and I'm just kind of rounding out my type cores at this point. Electric Grass is actually a phenomenal defensive typing, and Rotom, all the Rotom forms make great use of terrestrialization. I think this is going to put in a lot of work for me. Up next is Vivian. Vivian was more of a personal pick than anything. I just love this mon. It's one of my favorite bug types, no question. Its stats are pretty okay, but what really sells it is its support capabilities. So Compound Eyes increases the accuracy of the moves that you use, increasing Sleep Powder's accuracy by a good amount, so that's fantastic. I may not have Spore on my team, but fast, accurate Sleep Powders are really threatening, especially considering all the Spore users are slow. Toadscruel isn't slow, it's base 100 speed, but its ability forces it to go last in its priority bracket. So all things considered in the draft, this is one of the fastest sleep users you can have. I haven't fully verified its moveset, so my memory may be incorrect, but I know in the past it's had access to Rage Powder and Tailwind, which are both phenomenal pieces of support. It also gets Quiver Dance, and it can hit with Hurricane, Energy Ball, Bug Buzz. It's honestly kind of offensively threatening. If my opponent expects a support set and I end up clicking Quiver Dance, it can probably do some work. It did lose access to its signature move, Powder, which I really liked that move. It's a priority move, and you target an opponent, and if they use a fire-type move, they explode, they don't get to use their move, and they take a quarter of their HP and damage. Thought that was a really interesting thing for Vivian to have. It's not in the game, which kind of sucks, but I think overall this is going to be very, very useful. If I'm not running the support set, I could run Shield Dust if I'm worried about getting faked out or something, but Friend Guard is awesome. My team isn't like the bulkiest. There's some bulk in some places. Crocodile can intimidate and snarl. Bronzon's pretty tanky. Braviary is pretty tanky. Besides that, not a ton of bulk. Friend Guard is huge. Friend Guard is so helpful. Just the fact I can have a nuisance kind of support or offensive piece on the field alongside any of my other incredible Pokemon and just make them naturally bulkier is fantastic. Not to mention, this is yet another Pokemon that is potentially immune to a Crocodile Earthquake. All in all, I'm really pleased with this pick. My second to last pick was Pyroar. There weren't a lot of fire types left in the draft at this point, and I had neglected to pick one up, and I wanted just a decent, good fire type, and I felt like in the D tier, Pyroar was pretty high value. The normal type doesn't do it a ton of favors, but it's a ghost immunity, and for having a couple ghost weaknesses on my team, I'm happy to have another normal type, as it doesn't share any weaknesses with Braviary, doesn't really hurt anything. Its abilities are pretty cool and interesting. Moxie's a little strange because with that low 68 attack, but you could catch someone off guard with that because its physical move pool is actually pretty decent. Unnerve is phenomenal in draft. That's really the ability that I wanted from this thing. Just preventing berries from being eaten is just another thing that you're forcing your opponents to worry about, and if they decide to run a berry, they have to remember that that's a liability for them. Rivalry is interesting. Another benefit to draft is that there are some Pokemon, like Tinkaton comes to mind, right, that are always one gender. So if I'm going to the Toronto Tinkaton and I have my Pyroar up against Tinkaton, which in general is a good matchup for Pyroar, but if I need that little bit of extra damage, Rivalry can help because it's always female. So that's just something to consider and something that's kind of interesting. Good support move pool, decent damage, some neat options, just a nice versatile D tier. For my last pick, I wanted to round out my elemental core. By that, I mean a fire type, a grass type, and a water type. I finished my fantasy core, filled in with some good overall support and damage pieces, gave a lot of options for an earthquake user, and now I wanted a fire type, a water type, and a grass type. The water type came last. I kind of thought that someone might pick up Klotzer, but at this point in the draft, most coaches went for an AADD purchase, where me and a couple other coaches went ABCD, and most coaches already had all their C's, so I felt a little more comfortable delaying Klotzer, and I got it. I've never played with Klotzer before, but it has pretty good stats. Mega Launcher makes it do a surprising amount of damage, and it increases the effect of Heal Pulse, which is pretty interesting. I love the middling speed here. I have Tailwind and Trick Room, and Klotzer can totally handle both. It's not going to go super fast in Tailwind, but if I invest in speed, it could outspeed some key targets, which again, in draft, when you know exactly what you're going up against, that's really, really useful. Its move pool is great, and most of its best moves are boosted by Mega Launcher, and with 120 special attack, that's pretty strong. I'm pretty pleased with this. Defensively, its bulk isn't bad. It's just kind of run-of-the-mill, 71, 88, 89. That's fine. It's better than a lot. So it's not necessarily a bulky water type, but if I wanted to invest in bulk, it looks good. All in all, I think Klotzer is really diverse and interesting. The only thing I probably won't do is run a physical set. but everything considered, I think it's a really awesome last pick of my draft. If we want to look at them all together, I'm really pleased. Aesthetically, they're cool. There's a lot of color diversity, but I'm just really interested and excited to see what I can do with this draft. I will admit it's a lot less planned than BDSP. I know a lot of the returning coaches that were coming from that draft were saying that their plans for the draft were totally shattered. They didn't do a lot of things that they wanted to do. And the same thing happened to me. I wasn't planning on getting necessarily any of these mons. I think the only ones that I were like, oh, these would be really good just for me in general because I like them, are Vivian and Crocodile. The rest of them, I was just like, well, now is the time. I gotta pick some mons, and these ones look good to me. So it was a bit of a scramble, so to speak. But that being said, I feel pretty confident about it, and I think we'll have a really solid run. For the limited season that we ran that we didn't quite get to finish, I ended up going 7-1, I believe, which was second place in the draft, or maybe tied for second, which I'm really pleased with. I'd like to have a similar run. I'd like to make it to playoffs / top cut. I think I do have what it takes. That's really all I have to say about my draft. I'm really excited to get this going. For the draft schedule for the matchups, I actually ended up with a bye week 1, which is going to happen when you have 14 with divisions of 7, 2 divisions of 7. There's always going to be one team in each division that isn't playing. Interestingly, the Peachy Pikachu are the other team in the UVA division that are not playing, so we have a special plan for some content, some unofficial to the draft, but we are draft league theming it because, hey, it's a draft league, we might as well, but whatever happens in that match isn't like official for stat keeping, if that makes sense. But then I'm starting off in week 2 just in a couple weeks from when I record this, and we're going to get going. We're going to get through the regular season, we're going to hopefully make it to playoffs, and it's going to be a lot of fun. If you're excited for draft and you want to follow how the Colorado Cramorant are doing, please leave a like, please leave a subscription, please join the Discord. This is all centered around the Calyrex Game Corner Discord. You can access the link that's in the description, or we have our own URL now. Just go up to the browser, type in the URL discord.gg/Calyrex. It'll take you straight there. And there's a lot of things happening in that Discord that aren't just draft league related either, although that is a bit of a focus right now. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day, and I can't wait to show you the battles with the Colorado Cramorant.